Some games never get the credit they deserve. Sometimes a rough launch scares people away. Other times, a game simply gets buried under bigger releases and is forgotten way too quickly. But every once in a while, you stumble across a game that makes you wonder, how is nobody talking about this? So today, we're looking at 20 seriously underrated games that deserve a second chance. Let's get started. Atomic Heart is one of those games that many people decided to hate before they actually gave it a fair chance. Sure, the launch wasn't perfect, and some of the criticism was justified, but underneath those early issues is a surprisingly creative and memorable experience. The game's retro-futuristic Soviet setting is unlike anything else out there. Every robot looks like it came straight out of a bizarre science fiction art exhibit, and the entire Facility 3826 complex feels both beautiful and unsettling at the same time. Combat is where things really shine. Combining your polymer glove abilities with melee weapons creates chaotic, fast-paced battles where you're constantly freezing enemies, setting them on fire, shocking them, or launching them across the room. The contrast between sleek Soviet architecture and horrifying biological experiments gives the game a unique visual identity that sticks with you long after you finish playing. It's not a perfect game, but it's a lot better than its reputation suggests, and today it's easily one of the most overlooked action RPG shooters you can play. Starfield might be one of the most misunderstood RPGs of the last decade. A lot of players jumped in, played a few hours, and decided it was boring. The problem is that Starfield doesn't reveal its best content immediately. The real magic starts once you dive into the faction storylines. The Crimson Fleet questline feels like a full-blown space crime drama, while the Rugin Industries missions deliver some of the best corporate espionage and manipulation Bethesda has ever written. These story arcs are where the game truly comes alive. Then there's the shipbuilding system, which remains one of the deepest customization systems in any RPG. You can spend hours designing the perfect spacecraft and still find new ways to improve it. Yes, some planets can feel empty. That's a fair criticism, but the handcrafted locations hidden throughout the galaxy often contain fantastic stories, memorable characters, and surprising discoveries. Starfield was quickly labeled a disappointment, and that label prevented many players from seeing what the game actually does well. If you gave up on it early, it might be worth another trip into the stars. Despite being one of the best FPS releases of 2025, Doom: The Dark Ages somehow flew under the radar compared to previous entries in the series. Instead of pushing the series further into hyperspeed combat like Doom Eternal, id Software took a bold step in the opposite direction. Combat feels heavier, more deliberate, and incredibly powerful. The new shield mechanics completely changed the flow of battle. You're no longer just dodging and shooting at lightning speed. You're blocking, parrying, counterattacking, and smashing through hordes of demons like an unstoppable medieval tank. The dark fantasy setting is absolutely incredible. Massive castles, demonic armies, giant war machines, and brutal battlefield encounters make the game feel like Doom crossed with a nightmare version of medieval Europe. Doomslayer is still unstoppable, but this time he feels less like a race car and more like a wrecking ball. If you're an FPS fan, this is one you absolutely shouldn't miss. I've spent hundreds of hours in Valheim, and every time I return, I'm reminded why it's one of the best survival games ever made. The moment you step into its Viking-inspired world, exploration becomes addictive. Every forest feels mysterious, every mountain looks like it might be hiding something important, and every distant shoreline makes you wonder what's waiting beyond the horizon. What makes Valheim special is how it constantly balances curiosity and danger. You're always excited to explore, but you're also aware that one bad decision could send you running back home. Some of the game's most memorable moments happen while sailing. Drifting through thick ocean fog in a longship while storm clouds gather overhead creates an atmosphere few games can match. Combat relies heavily on timing and parrying, making battles satisfying without becoming overly complicated. The building system is equally impressive, allowing players to create genuine Viking settlements rather than simply stacking boxes together. Whether you're playing solo or with friends, Valheim remains one of the most rewarding and overlooked survival experiences available today. Deathloop is one of those rare games that gets better the more you understand it. At first, Black Reef Island seems confusing. You're trapped in a time loop and tasked with eliminating 8 targets before the day resets. But as you gather information across multiple loops, everything starts clicking together. In Deathloop, knowledge is your most valuable weapon. Every clue, every conversation, and every discovery pushes you closer to solving the puzzle. The gunplay feels fantastic, and the supernatural abilities will immediately remind many players of Dishonored. The difference is that Deathloop encourages much more aggressive and creative playstyles. Then there's Juliana, the rival assassin who can invade your game at any moment. Knowing another player might suddenly appear and hunt you down creates some incredibly tense and unforgettable encounters. What's really impressive is how each district changes throughout the day. Visit the same location in the morning, afternoon, evening, and night, and you'll find completely different events, characters, and opportunities. Once everything finally falls into place, the payoff is incredibly satisfying. It's one of the smartest games Arcane has ever created. The Planet Crafter takes one of science fiction's coolest concepts, terraforming an entire planet, and turns it into a surprisingly addictive game. You begin on a lifeless, hostile world with almost nothing. No trees, no lakes, no atmosphere, just rocks and survival. But slowly, things start changing. You build machines that increase oxygen levels, atmospheric pressure rises, clouds begin to form, water appears, plants start growing. Before long, the barren wasteland you landed on begins transforming into a living ecosystem. Watching that transformation happen is incredibly rewarding because you're directly responsible for every step of it. The resource management starts simple but gradually becomes deeper and more complex as your operation expands. Managing power grids, oxygen production, and advanced manufacturing systems creates a satisfying progression loop that constantly gives you new goals. Best of all, there are no enemies constantly attacking you and no stressful combat encounters. It's a game focused entirely on exploration, creation, and watching a dead world come back to life. If survival games usually feel too punishing for you, the Planet Crafter might be the perfect place to start. And despite how good it is, surprisingly few people have actually played it. Darksiders 3. Darksiders 3 might be the most divisive game in the series, but it's also one of the most underrated. Instead of focusing on brute force, the game puts you in the boots of Fury, the only female horseman of the apocalypse, and she's a completely different kind of warrior. She's fast, aggressive, and relies on timing rather than raw strength. Combat leans into parry and dodge mechanics, giving it a Souls-like flavor while still keeping the fast-paced action Darksiders fans love. Every elemental form completely changes how you approach fights. One moment you're burning enemies with fire, the next you're freezing, electrifying, or crushing them with stone powers. The interconnected world design rewards exploration without becoming overwhelming, and the darker atmosphere gives the game a tone unlike any other entry in the franchise. It split longtime fans down the middle, but many newcomers ended up appreciating exactly what made it different. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. Some games are nostalgic, others feel timeless. Oblivion somehow manages to be both. The RPG that helped redefine open-world gaming has returned with a stunning visual overhaul, bringing Cyrodiil to life in a way many fans only dreamed about. The rolling green landscapes, massive Imperial City, and terrifying Oblivion gates all look incredible, but the magic of the original is still intact. What really stands out is how much freedom the game gives you. Build your character however you want, improve skills naturally by using them, and lose yourself in some of the greatest faction questlines ever made. The Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood, Fighters Guild, and Mages Guild are still better written than what many modern RPGs offer. This isn't just nostalgia talking. Oblivion remains one of the best RPGs ever made, and for players who started with Skyrim, finally experiencing its legendary predecessor feels like uncovering a missing piece of gaming history. It's honestly amazing how Mirror's Edge came out in 2008 and still feels fresh today. Plenty of games have tried to copy its parkour system, but very few have captured the same feeling of momentum and freedom. Every jump, wall run, and rooftop sprint feels physical. You don't just control Faith, you feel connected to every movement she makes. The minimalist city design remains one of the most recognizable visual styles in gaming. Bright white rooftops contrasted with bold splashes of color don't just look good, they actually guide you through the world naturally. One of the smartest decisions the developers made was making combat intentionally weak. The game wants you to run, escape, and keep moving rather than stand still and fight. That choice makes every chase sequence feel incredibly intense. Even with Mirror's Edge Catalyst existing, there's still something uniquely pure about the original that makes it worth revisiting today. Nobody expected Robocop Rogue City to be this good. Licensed games usually come with low expectations, but this one completely surprised people. The moment you step onto the crime-filled streets of Detroit, it becomes obvious that the developers genuinely understood what makes Robocop special. You don't move like a traditional action hero. You're a walking tank. Every step feels heavy. Every shot from the Auto 9 feels powerful. Instead of dodging bullets, you're absorbing damage and marching straight through enemy fire like an unstoppable machine. What makes the game even better is that it doesn't focus entirely on combat. There are investigations, detective work, moral choices, and conversations with citizens that make you feel like you're actually serving and protecting Detroit. More than anything, the game captures the spirit of the 1987 movie perfectly. If you grew up loving Robocop, this is an easy recommendation. Enshrouded made a strong first impression when it launched in early access, but somehow it still doesn't get mentioned enough when people talk about great survival games. The world is covered by a deadly fog known as the Shroud, and exploring these dangerous areas creates a constant sense of risk and discovery. One minute you're searching ancient ruins for loot, the next you're sprinting away from creatures hidden within the mist. What really separates Enshrouded from the competition is its building system. Instead of placing simple blocks, you can create genuinely impressive structures that feel like real fantasy architecture. architecture. Combat is fast and satisfying, offering plenty of freedom to mix melee weapons, bows, and magic depending on your playstyle. Visually, the game is gorgeous too. The glowing green shroud zones, snowy mountains, and massive landscapes create some incredible scenery. If you enjoy games like Valheim or Ark, there's a very good chance you'll lose dozens of hours to Enshrouded. Imagine taking the atmosphere of Half-Life's Black Mesa facility and turning it into a survival game. That's basically the pitch for Abiotic Factor, and somehow it works even better than it sounds. Instead of playing a heavily armed hero, you're a group of scientists trying to survive inside a massive research facility that's gone completely off the rails. You'll build weapons out of office supplies, turn break rooms into safe houses, and use scientific equipment in ways it was definitely never intended to be used. The entire game embraces creativity and problem solving. Exploration constantly rewards curiosity. Every hallway, laboratory, and maintenance tunnel feels like it has a story to tell. Resource management is surprisingly clever too, with your character's stress levels directly affecting their performance and efficiency. The game supports up to 6-player co-op, and honestly, that's where some of the best moments happen. Few games manage to blend survival, horror, comedy, and science fiction this successfully. Some games are about saving the world. Callisto is about trying to understand it. Set in a country devastated by war, this game focuses just as much on the emotional scars left behind as it does on the battles themselves. Everywhere you go, you see the consequences of conflict. Ruined towns, abandoned roads, and communities struggling to rebuild what was lost. The combat takes inspiration from Souls-like games, but it's far more approachable. Reading enemy attacks and mastering your timing still matters, but the game never feels unnecessarily punishing. Exploration is where Callisto really shines. You're encouraged to wander, investigate, and piece together the mysteries of this fractured world on your own. The atmosphere is incredible. Fog-covered landscapes, crumbling buildings, and the constant feeling that something is watching from the distance create a world that's both beautiful and unsettling. It may not get the same attention as bigger releases, but for players who love strong atmosphere and meaningful exploration, Callisto could end up being one of the most overlooked games of the year. Path of Exile 2. If you're looking for depth, Path of Exile 2 might be one of the deepest RPGs ever made. Grinding Gear Games spent years refining the formula of the original game, and the result feels less like a sequel and more like a complete evolution of everything that came before it. Combat is slower and more deliberate than many modern ARPGs. Every dodge, every attack, and every decision carries weight. The build variety is where things become truly insane. The skill gem system turns character creation into an endless experiment. Every new idea can lead to an entirely different playstyle, and the possibilities feel almost limitless. Even in early access, the amount of content available is impressive. Add in the dark fantasy world, stunning environments, and satisfying combat, and it's easy to see why so many ARPG fans are excited about its future. Yes, there's a learning curve, a steep one actually. But once everything clicks, the level of customization and satisfaction is incredibly hard to match. For players who felt disappointed by recent entries in the genre, Path of Exile 2 might be exactly what they've been looking for. Astrometica. Space can feel lonely. Astrometica makes sure you never forget that. From the moment you leave your small survival capsule, you're surrounded by an endless void. There are no crowded cities, no friendly faces, just silence, distance, and the constant need to find resources if you want to survive. What makes the game stand out is its zero-gravity movement system. Momentum matters. Every movement has consequences. Send a tool drifting into space by accident, and you might have to chase it down before it's gone forever. It's a simple idea that creates surprisingly tense moments. Building your own space station is equally rewarding. Watching a small outpost slowly grow into a massive orbital structure creates a sense of accomplishment that few survival games can match. Many people compare it to Subnautica, and that's understandable. It captures that same feeling of isolation and discovery, but instead of the deep ocean, you're exploring the endless darkness of space. It's still growing through early access, but the foundation is already strong enough to make Astrometica one of the most promising survival games most players haven't heard about yet. The Altars might be one of the most original sci-fi games released in years. You play as Jan Dulski, a stranded worker trying to survive on a hostile planet. The twist: you can create alternate versions of yourself based on different life choices you could have made. One Jan became an engineer, another became a doctor, another followed a completely different path. Each version of you brings unique skills that help keep your mobile base running and your survival chances alive. But the real magic isn't in the mechanics, it's in the conversations. These clones are technically you, yet they're also their own people. They remember different lives, different regrets, and different dreams. As you interact with them, the game constantly asks one fascinating question: if your life had gone differently, would you still be the same person? Base management, resource gathering, survival mechanics, and psychological storytelling all come together beautifully. After the success of Frostpunk, 11-bit Studios once again proves that they're not afraid to tackle ambitious ideas. The Altars isn't just another survival game, it's one of the most thought-provoking sci-fi experiences in recent memory. Rage 2 is one of those games that almost nobody talks about anymore, and honestly, that's a shame. If there's one thing this game absolutely nails, it's combat. The combination of id Software's legendary gunplay and Avalanche Studios' open-world experience creates a shooter that feels pure, fast, and incredibly satisfying. The real fun comes from chaining abilities together. Launch enemies into the air, slam them back to the ground, throw your wing stick through multiple targets, and watch complete chaos unfold around you. Every fight feels like a playground for destruction. What also makes Rage 2 stand out is its colorful post-apocalyptic world. Instead of the usual gray wasteland, the game embraces bright neon colors, bizarre mutants, and over-the-top action. The story isn't its strongest feature, and that's fair to admit. But if you're looking for a game that simply lets you have fun and enjoy some of the most satisfying FPS combat of the last decade, Rage 2 is a hidden gem waiting to be rediscovered. When people talk about Assassin's Creed, they usually mention Black Flag, Ezio, or Origins, but Rogue is often left out of the conversation, even though it's arguably one of the most unique entries in the entire franchise. For the first time, you're not playing as an assassin, you're playing as a Templar. That single decision completely flips the series' traditional perspective and forces you to see the conflict from the other side. As Shay Cormac, you go from being hunted to becoming the hunter, and that change makes the story surprisingly refreshing. The frozen waters of the North Atlantic create an atmosphere unlike anything else in the series. Icebergs drift across the ocean, snowstorms reduce visibility, and abandoned settlements feel isolated and haunting. It still carries the naval gameplay that made Black Flag so popular, but the colder setting gives it a completely different identity. For longtime fans, Rogue also serves as a crucial bridge between Black Flag and Assassin's Creed 3. If you've never played it, you're missing one of the franchise's most overlooked stories. Back in 2010, Castlevania Lords of Shadow divided fans. Some longtime players argued that it wasn't a real Castlevania game, but if you look beyond those expectations, you'll find one of the most underrated action-adventure games of its era. You play as Gabriel Belmont on a dark and tragic journey through a world filled with monsters, ancient curses, and forgotten kingdoms. The game's dark fantasy atmosphere is incredible, with massive castles, eerie forests, ruined villages, and terrifying creatures around every corner. Combat revolves around the Combat Cross, a weapon that allows for fluid combos, crowd control, and powerful magical attacks. Boss battles are especially memorable, often feeling massive in scale and surprisingly creative. The soundtrack, visuals, and storytelling all come together to create an adventure that still holds up remarkably well today. The Callisto Protocol. The Callisto Protocol may be one of the most unfairly judged games of recent years. When it launched, expectations were sky high because it came from Glenn Schofield, one of the creators of Dead Space. Many players expected a revolutionary horror masterpiece, and when the game didn't completely reinvent the genre, the backlash was immediate. But if you approach it on its own terms, you'll discover something very different. Black Iron Prison is one of the most visually impressive horror environments ever created. The cold steel corridors, flickering lights, distant screams, and overwhelming sense of isolation create an atmosphere that's genuinely unsettling. Few horror games look this good even today. The combat system also tries something different. Instead of focusing purely on shooting, it mixes melee combat with strategic positioning. Using the GRP device to throw enemies into environmental hazards before finishing them off creates a brutal rhythm that feels unique. Is it perfect? No, but beneath the criticism is a horror experience with incredible visuals, strong atmosphere, and plenty of memorable moments. For fans of Dead Space-style sci-fi horror, it's absolutely worth giving a second chance.